So welcome to the Tuna Canyon Detention Station traveling exhibit. We're very excited about this. This exhibit is about the Tuna Canyon Detention Station, which was located about 14 miles north of downtown Los Angeles. On December 7th, as we all know, in 1941, when the Japanese military bombed Pearl Harbor, the FBI and other law enforcement officials started arresting Japanese, German, and Italian aliens in Hawaii and on the U.S. mainland. The U.S. Justice Department incorporated the Tuna Canyon Civilian Conservation Corps camp and converted it into this detention center. 12-foot-tall barbed wire fences. It had guard towers, a watchtower, floodlights. They were hurriedly built to house primarily male prisoners to be later processed and sent to Department of Justice or Army internment camps. Spiritual, educational, community and business leaders were rounded up. They were arrested. They were taken from their homes and businesses, leaving behind confused and frightened wives and children. This exhibition reaches beyond conventional thinking and takes on an unprecedented look at war's impact on a group of detainees, examining both the striking similarities as well as their differences. An honor wall with each detainee's name will be the highlight of the traveling exhibit, with the hope that future generations might learn from our nation's mistake that never again innocent people be targeted because of race, ethnicity, or religious beliefs. Now, we are seeing this play again and again in recent history and today, and we're moving into some fearful times that we're not clear on where we are headed. So this chapter in American history is vitally important. Quote, the civil and human rights of over 2,000 people were violated at Tuna Canyon Detention Station. For all of the groups involved, what happened during World War II was preceded by histories of prejudice and discrimination, and that's very important. Factors which contributed to public and political support for the government's actions. Civil and human rights are guaranteed by the U.S. Constitution and other documents, but these rights can be empty promises. They become real only to the degree that people are willing to hold these principles. In today's world, there are increasing threats to internal security, and unfortunately, many people are fearful of groups with which that they are not very familiar. This can easily lead to misunderstandings. So lessons from the past, including those from Tuna Canyon Detention Station, are important to prevent abuses of power against specific groups, such as those that occurred during World War II. Dr. Lloyd Hitt is a retired pharmacist and has served over 10 years as the president of the Bolton Hall Museum Historical Society. In 2006, with Paul Tsuneishi and the Japanese community, he spent close to 10 years compiling information and advocating for the preservation of the Tuna Canyon Detention Station site. So he's very important to this project. So ladies and gentlemen, please welcome Dr. Lloyd Hitt.
Good afternoon, and thank you for being here. We've worked a long time on this exhibit. Only the oaks remain. My journey actually started back in 2006, late 2006, when our local community learned that the Verdugo Hills Golf Course, the site of the tuna camp, had been sold and it was going to be used for a large development of 200-300 houses. This had always been kind of a park to everybody. When you drove home, you went up Tujunga Canyon Boulevard before freeways, and you always passed this campsite and a grove of oaks and sycamores and other trees and grass. It just was hard to see that disappear with a bunch of rooftops and houses perhaps 6 inches apart. As a member of the Sunland-Tunga Land Use Committee, Neighborhood Council, I had seen Snowball West's environmental report and noticed they had made a half-hearted effort to get a California State Historic Marker for the site and were turned down. I had asked Mark Handel, the developer at the time, where the marker would be placed, and he would never give me an answer. This would not have preserved any land, but would have provided a California Historic Marker that could be out on the curb or inside a gated community where nobody could see it. Mike Lawler was at that time president of the Crescenta Valley Historic Society, and I decided we should start something and do something. So he prepared a letter, and we mailed out several hundred letters to universities, anybody we thought might be interested in our project. And I don't know about Mike, but I got almost no response. Even universities where you had Japanese faculty and so on, maybe we just came out of the blue and they didn't know what to say. But anyway, we saw nothing happening. So I called a friend, a longtime friend, Paul Tanishi, which I'd known for many years, and we talked about the site. Before I knew it, Paul shows up with a stack of INS documents about 2.5 inches thick that he had picked up at the Pacific National Archives in Paris at that time. Seeing the documents, I knew we had to move forward, but not sure where forward was. Paul suggests that we visit the Japanese American National Museum for starters. He'd been doing oral histories at the museum and was very active in the Japanese American community, including the fight for reparations. Apparently, the museum really knew very little about the Tuna camp, so that I decided as a token of goodwill, I would give Janum a complete copy of our Tuna camp INS records. I also learned that when I called in Washington, D.C., the national parks in Washington, D.C. were unaware of the Tuna camp, at least the staff was. And eventually we met here at Janum and across the patio there and had a talk about it. At least we got it started because it was important that they knew that we were going to do something. With the archived documents, we continued our research, compiling records of how the camp was organized. The officer in charge, Merrill Scott, and his staff, and the names of the prisoners and their nationalities, we had to search out. And when you're looking at copies of carbon copies in Japanese with Japanese names, that's not easy. And it was going to take a lot of help from the Japanese community to bail us out. Regardless of what your program says today, there's an error. Marlene, my wife of 57 years, contacted Samuel Nicholson. Now, he's the eldest son of Herbert Nicholson, a Quaker missionary that lived in Pasadena. He'd spent over 10 years in Japan and came back when things started to get a little bit ugly in Japan in '39. They started following him around, and everybody he talked to, they questioned for hours after he left, so he thought he should just leave. So he came back and he settled in Pasadena, and she covered his life before and his missionary work during the war, and actually had a huge program post-war in Japanese-held territories and Japan for goats. He secured thousands of goats for milk for children on some of these devastated islands. So Herbert he really practiced his faith. She would talk to Sam, and Sam must have been about 93. He's the oldest son, and Herbert's been gone a long time, for 2 to 3 hours at a time on the phone. Sam didn't like to use, he used the internet, but I think it scared him a little bit. And he lived in a Quaker retirement home. Because Herbert and his wife lived in Pasadena at the time, well, I already told you that. Well, because he lived so close to the Tuna camp, and because of his association with the Japanese, and he'd already taken charge of a Japanese church because he's bilingual, because the pastor was ill. And so he was taking care of this church. He moved a lot of the furniture and stuff from Terminal Island into the basement of this church. He borrowed trucks, helped all these people evacuate. But he became a really good friend of Merrill Scott, the camp officer in charge. And they were really buddies. I think Scott was a Methodist, but that didn't make any difference. But he became the interpreter and the go-to person. He would come to the camp, and sometimes the word really didn't get out very fast of where these prisoners were to their families. They may just be a few miles away or across town. So he made it his job, Herbert made his job to get their phone numbers and names, and he'd call all the families and tell them what the visiting hours and when they could come. But really to get the word out started when I asked Paul to contact Rafu Shimpo and the Pacific Citizens, as you know, Japanese newspapers, to support us, and they let us print some short stories about what we were doing. And at the tuna camp, emails, I think within a week, the phones and the emails started pouring in, where people wanted to talk about their family at the camp. And there was one newsletter, which probably most of you are not familiar with, Crystal City Chatter. Well, I got to know Sumi Shimizu, who's the editor, and she writes that in, I think, in her living room or something. It's her little pit. She was at Crystal City, and I think they've quit taking tourists to Crystal City now, and she had to move up north, and she's so upset about being so far from the south. Anyway, at this point, we began to attract the attention of Japanese Americans and a few Germans and Italians of the tuna camp. We still had no photos of the camp, but just before the Cultural Heritage Commission hearing, I had a surprise call from David Scott. I almost couldn't talk because Scott became a very popular thing with me, and I knew nothing about his family. Well, this is his grandson. And he said his aunt had an album of pictures that Merrill Scott had taken of the camp. Not professional photographs. And also a bunch of snapshots of different people, and with the names of the people on them. When former Councilman Richard Alarcon came to me and he said, I'm nominating the site for Los Angeles Historic Monument status, he asked me to support the nomination as a local historian. I have previously worked on several historic sites, but I really doubted I could save this historic site. However, I realized he could, because Alarcon, being the councilman, it eventually, even after it was denied, it would come back to the city council. And he had the 10 votes to make it, to override the Cultural Heritage Commission, and it made it an historic status. And they did. I hate to say this, but not our current councilman, the one that followed him, hadn't taken office yet. He was taking Alarcon's job. He was in the back room calling all the council people, telling them to vote no. He's no longer with us right now. So working with Alarcon and his planning deputy, Gerald Gubiton, who is really a hero of the way he dug up information. Time? Okay. They want me to wind this up. In the end, with our hearings with Snowball West, it ended up going to court. And Snowball West sued the city for $20 million. They lost the suit. They lost 3 appeals. And right now we're waiting for an environmental report to come in. And but we continue to plan just like we're going to get it. We have the 1-acre site, but we don't have any word from the developer yet, and that's what we need. It will be coming out again very soon, and I think he's going to he closed the golf course. I think he's going to use that as a bargaining tool. So we've really taken a chaos of information to create this meaningful exhibit, Only the Oaks Remain. I hope you take away the message that never again can we deny rights to immigrants based only on race or religion in America. We continue to search for oral histories, and thank you all for your support.
Dr. Hitt, thank you very much. We'll be talking to Dr. Hitt again in just a few minutes. But first, I want to introduce you to Sigrid Toye. Sigrid was 4 years old. Her father was taken from their home in Los Angeles. And she tells us, quote, I knew that her life had changed. Even at that age, children are so intuitive. They may not know the facts, but they understand. So ladies and gentlemen, Sigrid Toye.
Okay, hello everybody. My name's Sigrid, and I just want to say first, thank you. Is that okay? Yep. I want to say first, thank you so much to the Japanese American Museum and all of the people I've met. When Anne talks about family, I get a little nauseatingly teary when I talk about this, but you talk about family, Anne. This is my home away from home. And I have to thank you all not only to Janum, but to so many of you for incorporating me in this, because without all of you, I would have very little voice. And I'm very, very appreciative to the Japanese American community for allowing me to have the privilege to be here. I also am very grateful to the Tuna Canyon Coalition, who has also incorporated me, have enfolded me, embraced me in their arms. And I'm, in behalf of myself and my parents, many, many thanks. Thank you, Nancy. Thank you, Kanji. So since I'm already on Panavision CinemaScope and television, you all have seen my story. So let me give you a little historical context, I think, about the German-American experience. Actually, it originated in the United States of America with the Alien and Sedition Acts. I'm sure most of you already know the story, but in 1798, the Alien and Sedition Acts were enacted. The Sedition Act was nullified. The Alien Act still exists today, to this day, and it was the Alien Act that allowed for the events previous, during, and after the Second World War to occur, because individuals whose country of birth were in hostile relations or at war with the United States of America could be legally picked up and detained, either to be released, continue to be detained, or to be repatriated as exchange, in prisoner exchange, during and before, and after the war. So I think the public consciousness is that the attacks on Pearl Harbor were actually the reason that all of this occurred. That was, in fact, a much too simplistic version of the story. Fact of the matter is, the First World War was, in fact, the template that created what happened to all of us during the Second World War. Because in 1914, when the war began, there were already moves afoot to prepare for potentially entering the war. And by 1916, the military was placed in charge of potential detainees. And of course, by 1917, when the United States of America entered the war on April 6th, that's when the apprehensions and detentions began to take place. And of course, the country with which the United States was at war was Germany. And so this primarily applied to the German-American population. And some of the detainees remained in detention within 2 years after the close of the war to end all wars in 1918, up until 1920. So there was a period of calm between the wars, and it wasn't long before the winds of war once again appeared on the horizon. And so that very template that originated for the German Americans during the First World War was placed into action with modifications. That enemy aliens that was quoted in the 1798 Alien Act was in fact a justification for all of the things that you guys already know. So I don't need to go into that because we share a common story. We share a common story. There are variations of the story, but we share a common story. And you've already seen my story. My father was picked up on the night of December 7th. We had no idea where he was taken, and we found out he went to Terminal Island Correctional, and from there to Tuna Canyon, and from there to Stringtown and back to Tuna, from where he was released in 1944. and was released innocent. Whoops, our mistake. And it changed our lives, as all of you know. It completely changed our lives. But what I'd like to talk about, this is a story that you all know, and perhaps this is one that you probably also know. I'd like to talk about my mom. My father didn't want us to go into the camps. A lot of German Americans went into Crystal City, a family camp containing both Japanese, German, American families. So we remained on the outside. And for those of us on the outside, food was scarce. Employment was almost impossible. No one wanted to hire a German. Could be a saboteur, one never knew. My mother was a very brave and wonderful lady. She kept going. We didn't have a lot to eat. There were a lot of fruit trees in our garden, I remember. But she was hospitalized a couple of times, and she was not the exception to the rule. I think there were a lot of people who were hospitalized. And to this day, and in front of all of you, I would like to tip my hat to my mom. It wasn't easy on my dad. It wasn't easy on those of you that were detained, but it also wasn't easy for those of us that were on the outside. And again, it's because of you guys that I'm allowed to be here. And I really, really appreciate it, because over the German American community, the great shadow of Adolf Hitler still exists. And because you've embraced me, I'm allowed to tell my story. And I want to thank all you guys again. That's all I can say is just thank you, thank you, thank you.
Sigrid, thank you very much. That was beautiful. So Grace Shimizu is the director of the Japanese-Peruvian Oral History Project and the Campaign for Justice, Redress, and now for Japanese Latin American internees. Ms. Shimizu also coordinated collaborative projects among Japanese, German, Italian, and Latin American communities, as well as Arab, Muslim, and South Asian communities to promote dialogue and draw relevant lessons from the past to connect them to the present-day challenges, which is so vitally important right now. So, ladies and gentlemen, Grace Shimizu.
Well, I want to share the experience of Koshio Henry Shima, who was brought from Peru to Tuna Canyon under the World War II Latin American Program of Extraordinary Rendition, initiated and orchestrated by the U.S. government. During that program, from December 7th, 1941 through December 1945, the U.S. government, in collaboration with the governments of 18 Latin American countries, seized over 6,000 men, women, and children of German and Italian and Japanese ancestry, both immigrant residents as well as citizens from those countries. Persons of German ancestry numbered but basically, for the persons of German ancestry, they numbered about 4,000 and included 81 Jewish refugees who had fled the European war zones seeking safe haven in Latin America. There were also about 288 of Italian ancestry and 2,264 of Japanese ancestry. They were taken from their homes and businesses, forcibly deported, and interned in U.S. concentration camps for the purpose of prisoner exchange and securing U.S. commercial, economic, military, and political interests in Latin America. So I don't have a lot of personal comments made by Koshio. He was a pretty private guy, but I can give you an overview of what he went through, and I invite you to think what emotions and reactions you might have felt in his place. Koshio was born Koshio Shimabukuro in Peru on September 17, 1923. His parents had emigrated from Okinawa and established a grocery store in the capital city, Lima. Prior to the breakout of World War II, his brother went to Okinawa when he was 8 years old, probably for schooling, and then was joined by his mother and sister. During the war, they were not able to return to Peru and remained separated from Koshio, his father, and another sister. In November 1942, while visiting his paternal uncles, Koshio was seized by the police along with an employee of his uncle's coffee shop. Koshio was 19 and a half years old. He was taken to a local jail in Lima and detained for 1 month. In December 1942, he was taken by truck with other folks to Talara, Peru, and then shipped off to Panama. At the U.S. military base there, he was put to hard labor for about a week or so. Next, he was taken by ship to Costa Rica and confined on board for about a week. Then on February 6, 1942, Koshio arrived by ship in San Pedro, California, and went through inspection at the customs office. He was detained at Tuna Canyon for a short time, and then he and others were taken by bus to Los Angeles and put on a train under armed guard to a Department of Justice concentration camp at Kennedy, Texas, where he was interned for 1.5 years. Koshio's father was arrested in early 1943 and was able to reunite with Koshio at that Kennedy camp. Later, they were both transferred to Kusiak camp in Idaho, and eventually they joined his sister and other relatives who were brought over to Crystal City camp in Texas. In October 1945, after the end of the war, Koshio's father and sister felt they had no choice but to go to Japan to reunite with family members there. Koshio, however, wanted to return to Peru because he'd never been to Japan before, didn't speak Japanese nor English, and Japan was in devastated condition. So in March 1946, Koshio was paroled out of the camp to work at Seabrook Farms in New Jersey for about 1.5 years as cheap labor. In 1948, Koshio moved to LA. All this while, he was classified as an illegal alien. In 1952, he got married and became a permanent resident 3 years later. On March 17, 1961, Koshio became a naturalized citizen and changed his name to Koshio Henry Shima. As the Japanese-American community was organizing for redress and reparations, Koshio submitted his redress application in about 1990 and again in 1993 because the Office of Redress Administration informed him they didn't get his first application. So later in 1993, he received an undated letter saying his application was denied. He was not eligible for redress because he was a so-called illegal alien at the time of internment. He was ineligible because of the label the U.S. government gave him after it forcibly brought him to the U.S. In 1996, with the formation of the Campaign for Justice, Koshio became a named plaintiff in the Mochizuki lawsuit, which demanded that the U.S. government provide redress to the Japanese Latin Americans under the Civil Liberties Act of 1988. When the U.S. government made a controversial settlement offer to end the lawsuit, Koshio was among 17 Japanese Latin Americans who opted out of that agreement. While he supported the decision of other Japanese Latin Americans to accept the offer because it was important for the U.S. government for the first time to acknowledge wrongdoing and to grant an apology, Koshio rejected that offer. He believed that the notification provision was inadequate, meaning an ad that was placed in one Japanese newspaper and one Peruvian paper for 1 day. And that the apology letter did not even mention Latin America, nor specify the violations that were committed. And the $5,000 compensation payment was not commensurate with the severity of the violations. So he filed another lawsuit in the District Court of Los Angeles, but this was dismissed in 2001. He was told that it was too bad because the statute of limitations had passed. So he decided not to further pursue his case by appealing to the U.S. Supreme Court, and then he passed away in January of 2005. Koshio's courage and perseverance was key in laying the foundation for Art Shibayama and his brothers to continue the litigation struggle when they filed in 2003 a petition with the Inter-American Commission on Human Rights to hold the U.S. government for the ongoing failure to provide redress for war crimes and crimes against humanity perpetrated against them as children during World War II. It's been 13 years, and we're still waiting for a decision. We were informed that as the lawsuits are taken in chronological order, we can wait about 2 more years before our case comes up. But then, because of the extenuating circumstances of the plaintiff's age and health, we may have the opportunity for a public hearing in March of next year. So that will be the first time then that the U.S. government will have to answer in public for what it did to the Latin Americans. And so we invite people to join our community delegation that will be going to this historical event if it happens. So our community, the Japanese American community, knows the dark side of what can happen in this country when our nation gets in the grip of fear-based hysteria, racism, anti-immigrant bigotry, and religious intolerance, when this all gets inflamed and fueled by greed and economic competition, political opportunism, and sensational journalism, and then gets justified by claims of national security and military necessity. So while mass incarceration, like what happened during World War II, is not happening yet today, we do see history repeating itself with even more sinister twists and turns. And our community and so many other communities are scared. We're scared, especially after what we saw unfold during the recent presidential election campaign and the aftermath of the election results. So shock waves have reverberated across the nation, especially with the rise in hate speech and hate violence, especially by emboldened the white supremacists and their attempts to normalize this climate. But even though it's scary times, I think it's also a time of opportunity. It poses to us to really look at what's our history? What do we really know about our history, in particular this World War II history? What facts do we raise up for the public to look at? What get marginalized? What that gets hidden? And then looking at what's our analysis? What do we learn? What do we say as the past lessons, and what's the parallels and the links to today? And I would say that our call of never again is not good enough. We've got to come up with something better because of the place that we're at today. And this is not the purview of just the Japanese American community. It's for everyone. Because what we're here to do is to protect our communities, our families, to protect our democracy, our constitution, and human rights. And so what this is an opportunity is to have more dialogue, to learn from each other, to talk with each other, and to actually build relations, working relations, not these fake relations that we kind of refer to. We need to cross race, religion, ethnicity, cross over issues that we've been siloing ourselves around, and really talk about what is it that we're going to do in this next period, because times are very scary, and but we know that by working together, we can make a change. By the strength of us together, we can weather this big storm that we're going into. And that's why this exhibit is really so important at this time. It's so timely that we have a chance to learn what happened right down our area in Tuna Canyon, not only to Japanese Americans, but to the Germans and Italians, and the effect that it had to the whole communities surrounding it. So thank you very much.
Wonderful. Thank you. That's a great speech. So stay put. We're going to open up for questions from our audience for our 3 panelists. If I may, Sigrid, I wanted to ask you the first question real quickly. You know, the JA community, we're all very familiar with the fact that after families got out of these camps, the parents never talked about it to the next generation. What was that similar to you, or were your parents the same way?
Yes, they were. One of the reasons that I took this particular topic for my dissertation was that there was a dearth of information about German Americans and what happened during the wars. And I just wanted to find out if there were other people out there, folks like me, who felt the same as I did. And the place that I came was the Japanese American Museum and also Simone Wiesenthal. There is lots and lots of research on the Japanese American and the Holocaust survivor experience. And those experiences are the ones that informed me, gave me courage to speak out. And there are more and more stories coming out now, but what we all have in common, are exactly that. Our parents did not speak of it. They were ashamed. My father, as I'm sure your families were proud people who had done nothing wrong. And like Grace said, how would I have felt at the age of 39 or 40 when my father was a young man and when many of your people were young and ready and come to this country for a new life and to do big things? The streets were lined with gold. That's the way it was. And then voila, it was a really wonderful experience to connect with so many other researchers. I met Grace through there. Grace and I are, she's short, I'm tall, but we're buddies.
That's wonderful. Are there any questions out there so far? Yes, ma'am.
I guess this is for Dr. Toye. Oh,
For Dr. Hitt?
the lady in the middle.
Sigrid Toye?
Hi.
Toye?
Yes. You said something about the Alien Act in 1798. Is that still existing? Or?
Yes, it is.
So is there any way that we can get this changed because of our new president that we have? He said that he was going to do it in a humane way.
You know, that's where Grace has her point in saying that it doesn't make any difference. Green, purple, yellow, this religion, that religion, whatever. These are the things where we need to stick together. I mean, the short answer is it doesn't sound like anytime soon, unless enough people speak up that no one is aware that the Alien Act is still in effect and allows, and under the present circumstances, I'm not 100% sure how well that's going to go over in Washington, so which is one of the reasons that our communities need to really stick together.
Any other questions out there? Yes, in the back of the room. For Grace?
I recently heard that there was an inconsistency where some of the Peruvian Japanese were given a full 20,000 reparation and others were only offered 5,000. What can you tell us about that discussion?
Okay. Let's see. Yeah, it's like within one family, given the way the redress was structured, some people got the $20,000 compensation, others got $5,000, and others got nothing. That's in Art Shibayama's family. And the reasoning for that was the Civil Liberties Act of 1988, which granted redress to Japanese Americans. The way it was interpreted by the Department of Justice was that if you were, it's only U.S. citizens and legal permanent residents could get that redress, which is an apology letter and the compensation. But I guess there was a change in the law in the 1950s where the folks from Latin America who were considered illegal aliens, if they just filled out the right papers and did the right things, they could get permanent residency made retroactive. So on their cards, it would indicate that they came in during the war years, you know, and could be considered for the purposes of redress as being permanent residents. So those folks were able to get $20,000. For those that didn't hear about that law, didn't know about that window of time, and couldn't make that application, it was too bad for them. But under the Mochizuki settlement, that lawsuit, that settlement offered $5,000. You know, and so if you were deemed eligible for that settlement, you could get that. And then everyone else, it's just too bad.
Questions? Yes, ma'am, in the back of the room, right over here. A mic is coming your way. 1 second. Here we go. There it is.
Hello, I'm Grace Shimizu Nakamura, and my grandfather was in Tuna Canyon, and I made the discovery when I examined his journal that he had been in many places. I didn't realize there were so many justice camps, or so-called justice camps. And Michi Weglin, who did a lot of research, she wrote The Years of Infamy that made the redress possible, historically possible, because she had found all the primary sources material. My grandfather heard about Pearl Harbor on December 7th, going home from Little Tokyo Union Church. And he told my mother, who was a widow, we were going to their house to spend the day after church. He said, "Hide, take me home, because I will be picked up probably before dawn. I mean, before the sun sets tonight by the FBI." So I was sitting in the back seat, and I said, "Grandpa, what vacation are you going on?" And he said, because he was a librarian in Japan and was a man of letters and read a lot of history, he said, before sunset, they will come and pick me up. So he hurried home, packed his little his little briefcase from his librarian days with his journal and, you know, whatnot, and got everything in order, told the family, "You're not to destroy anything." Like a lot of families threw things away because they were fearful of some kind of search happening. And he said, don't do that. He said, find somebody that you can respect that will take care of our things. And at the end of the war, we'll see what will happen. Well, it happened that we did not know where he was, but his journal later told all the places he had been into. There were more than 10 places. Tuna Canyon was about the third one. He finally ended up in Santa Fe, New Mexico, and then at the very, very end, sent to, and Reverend Nicholson has been our family friend for years and years and years. He was a daddy goat grandpa, and so we knew him. He came to visit us at Manzanar, and so I have all that history that is there for you to see, if you'd like that information. And I'm very pleased to hear it, because I didn't know how the Germans were involved and how the Italians were involved, and I wanted to find out more about Peru, because we have some relatives in Peru. So, yes, so thank you very much.
Thank you. Thank you for those words. Dr. Hitt, I'm curious, because the Japanese American internment, it was so large. Most folks on the West Coast know about it, although I will say that the rest of the country is very ignorant to that chapter. But why is it, in your opinion, so important to make sure that we don't forget the Germans and the Italians, and the fact that Tuna Canyon allows us to tell the story with everybody included?
Well, it would be easy to just pick on the Japanese because the majority of the people there were Japanese. But I think from the very beginning, we tried to make sure and find where everybody came from, whether it was from Peru, and the fact that they came on ships and they took their papers away, and so now they're illegal immigrants, so you can do whatever you want with them. But I think we always wanted to be inclusive, and we've had people in our committee of German and Italian descent. And we felt, at least I felt, that if we just picked one, the Japanese, we really haven't done our whole job. And we can see it happening right now amongst another group, that are being picked up and searched.
Absolutely. Yeah, Muslims. And I have learned a lot. Just listen to Sigrid to get your family story is quite incredible. So we have time for one more question, and then we're going to have to call it and move on. Anybody have the final question? Yeah, yes, ma'am. Right over here. There's a microphone coming up right behind you.
In the spirit of being inclusive, as you all say, I'd like to hear about Leonard Peltier, and he's still imprisoned. And we have relatives and his family here, what we could do in his case as well.
Leonard's family is here. Yes, Kathy, do you want to make a quick statement just on where the case is? We'll bring a microphone around, and this will have to be quick in our final question. But yeah, but please, for the folks who don't know, who is Leonard, and why is his case so important?
My name is Kathy Peltier. I'm the youngest daughter of Leonard Peltier. Leonard Peltier has been in prison for the last 41 years for a crime he didn't commit. If you want more information, I recommend to go whoisleonardpeltier.org. Who is Leonard Peltier info? Who is Leonard Peltier info? .info. I'm sorry. Anyways, the update on his case right now is right now, as we speak, there's a rally going on at in D.C. And my brother is doing all the speaking engagements, meeting different senators and legislative people up there. I got a chance to speak with one of his lawyers, and she's really trying to get it passed through officials who need. I can't. I'm sorry. I'm lost for words for that. But his lawyer's trying to get through different departments to be able to get his case on to getting pardoned. Or pardon or clemency. But right now we're on the clemency part since time is so short. Again, I'd recommend for any information just to go ahead and go to whoisleonardpeltier.info. I'm sorry, I don't have complete information about it, but if you want to talk to me afterwards, that's great. But I also have to go to another engagement with Ann at Amnesty International.
At Amnesty International. Thank you very much, Kathy. So, and what was that? Oh, how do you spell Peltier? P-A... Oh, P-E-L-T-I-E-R. So Leonard, regular spelling, P-E-L-T-I-E-R.info. So it's who is Leonard Peltier, P-E-L-T-I-E-R.info. Okay, thank you very much. So panelists, thank you so much for joining us today. We really appreciate your input. You were wonderful and helped inform us about how important Tuna Canyon is. So it is now an honor to introduce a dear friend of all of ours, and a hero at that, Mr. Terry Hara and his cousin Bob Hara are grandsons of Tuna Canyon Detention Station internee Otoji Hara from Terminal Island. So ladies and gentlemen, our friend, Terry Hara.
Good afternoon, everybody, and my congratulations to everybody to, first of all, to be here and to also learn about history and stories. We all of us, all of our families have a story to be told. And that story of the Hara family, my family, there was void in the story of wondering where my grandfather, Otoji Hara, was during a period of time when he was taken away at Terminal Island. He was a superintendent at the fishery cannery company on Terminal Island. And Otoji Hara was an individual that was very active in the community on Terminal Island. In fact, many of the residents there would seek his advice, employment, and problems that may have occurred, and he was always willing to help the community. In an interview that I did with Charlie Hamasaki, who was a friend, is a friend of the Hara family, he said that when Charlie was very, very young, and he would get into trouble sometimes, and steal some tuna cans, tops, from the factory to play with and to encourage the other boys and girls out there to throw it into the ocean. They would dive in, and he would give a nickel for the individual who had the largest collection of tuna can tops. But Charlie had always, as he said, and I think he's about 92, 93 years old now, that when he would basically steal the tuna can tops and use it for a game, my grandfather would always chase after him for the tuna cans so that he could bring him back. But then he would always allow Charlie just go on and play, go on and play. But the information that I learned about my grandfather, because he passed on a year before I was born, was that he was always community-minded. He was always a friend of the community, and always active participant. And Charlie has even said that, you know, Terry, you, in your work today in the community, is a reflection of your grandfather. And I hope that my grandfather would be very proud for what I have done as it relates to giving back to the community and being very much involved in community activities. When I got a call from Nancy Oda a couple years ago of explaining that they discovered a photograph that you have on your program on the cover is my grandfather. And I believe it was the only photograph that was recovered or that was acquired by Officer in Charge Merle Scott. And Nancy Oda asked me, Terry, have you seen this image before? And I told her no. It was the first time that I had seen a photograph of my grandfather, and it was taken in the detention center way back then. But what it also did was a very important part of the Hara family's history is to fill a void of learning where my grandfather was for those several months that he was missing, that nobody knew his whereabouts, no one in the family, except that he was taken away by government officials. So I want to thank the Tuna Canyon Coalition for very important learned information that helps fill a family void that we had in our family of learning where my grandfather was for the period of time that he was separated from his family. They then reunited later on to a Midwest farm where they stayed and worked. But like everyone else, a lot of our Iseis, the stories were not told. They were private individuals. And it's heartwarming to know and to learn more. I just wish that I had asked more questions from even though my grandfather had passed on, but my grandparents and others within the family who knew the Hara family and my grandfather, who my understanding is when he was younger, he was a young boy that worked at the Leland Stanford family and had learned a lot from that family, was very appreciative for what the Stanford family had provided him during his time there as well. So again, my congratulations to the Tuna Canyon Coalition, and thank you very much for listening to my story about my grandfather. Thank you.
Terry Hara, thank you so much. And again, that photo of his grandfather right there on the very cover of your program. So this basically brings our program to a close. Our thanks to all of our speakers today for opening our eyes on the importance of this chapter. I will say, though, that maybe I'm not supposed to say this, but As Kanji mentioned, the Issei would want us to tell this story and to speak out and to help the Muslims today. And I'm happy to say that this week that the White House actually has invited me and a few others from Southern California to come and speak and talk a little bit more about this chapter in American history, and also tie it in to the recent rash of Muslim hate that's going on across the country. So this important chapter in American history, we've always known it was important. We've always said, never forget. I don't know if we ever could have predicted how important it truly is and will become. And if anything is coming out of what's happening in the world today is the fact that we now can see the very clear relevance from 75 years ago to what's happening in our world today. And it's that much more important that people tell the story and speak up and speak out. So our panelists, thank you so much. For everybody else who spoke today, thank you as well.